Welcome, dear friends, and let me spin you a tantalizing tale of love, loyalty, betrayal, and the unbreakable bonds that truly make a family. Enjoy the story. John Hanson steered his sleek BMW down the familiar streets of his hometown of Oakville, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The 32-year-old hotshot entrepreneur was finally taking a much-needed break from his hectic life in New York City to visit his parents for the holidays. As the tidy suburban homes and manicured lawns flashed by, John felt the stresses of his high-stakes business dealings start to melt away. He pulled into the driveway of his parents' modest split-level home and turned off the engine. Gazing up at the window, he spotted the friendly face of his mother, Linda, peeking out from behind the curtain. A smile spread across John's chiseled features. No matter how far he went in life, coming back here always felt like returning to his roots. John popped the trunk and began unloading his designer suitcases and a stack of carefully wrapped presents. Just then, the front door swung open and out bounded his father, Robert, a spry 65-year-old with an easy grin. "Johnny, what a surprise!" Robert exclaimed, pulling his son into a tight bear hug. "We weren't expecting you for a few more hours." John laughed, patting his dad on the back. "I couldn't wait any longer to come home. It's been too long, Pop." Together they hauled John's things inside as Linda waved enthusiastically from the window. The comforting smells of a home-cooked meal wafted out, enveloping John like a warm blanket. His mother's cooking was second to none. "This is absolutely delicious, Ma," John praised, shoveling forkfuls of fluffy scrambled eggs into his mouth. "No five-star restaurant could ever top your famous breakfast spread." Linda beamed with pride as she refilled his coffee mug. "Nothing's too good for my baby boy, even if he did show up out of the blue," she teased. The three Hansons tucked into the hearty brunch of eggs, bacon, pancakes, and fresh fruit. For a little while, John was able to forget all about the troubles brewing back in the big city, especially the sneaking suspicion that someone close to him was trying to sabotage his business deals. He shook off the uneasy feeling, determined to enjoy this quality time with his family. "You're looking a bit peaked, dear," Linda remarked, studying John's face. "I hope you're not working yourself too hard." "I'm fine, Ma, really," John assured her. "Just haven't been sleeping that great lately. That's all." Robert chuckled. "Welcome to adulthood, son. Why don't you go upstairs and catch a nap? We'll keep the leftovers warm for you." John pushed back from the table and stretched. A nap did sound pretty good right about now. "I think I'll take you up on that," he agreed. "Wake me in a couple hours?" The crisp December air nipped at John's nose as he strolled through the quaint downtown streets. Twinkling Christmas lights sparkled overhead, lending a festive glow to the shop windows. He zipped his leather jacket against the chill, drinking in the nostalgic sights and sounds of his youth. A flash of color caught John's eye and he turned to see a small booth set up on the corner. The sign read, "Madame Natalie's Mystical Fortunes." Intrigued, John approached the young, pretty woman perched on a stool. "Come, come," she beckoned, her bangles jangling. "Let Madame Natalie glimpse your future, for a small price." Amused, John fished a $20 bill from his wallet and handed it over. What could it hurt to indulge in a little light-hearted fun? He extended his palm, and Natalie traced the lines with a gnarled fingertip, humming to herself. Suddenly, her cloudy eyes widened and she gasped. I see great purpose in your immediate future, young man. You will unexpectedly save an innocent life today, and in doing so, you will gain a new loyal friend who will never betray you." John laughed off the dramatic prediction and thanked Natalie for the reading, but as he continued on his way, her words echoed in his mind. Save a life? Gain a loyal friend? It all sounded pretty far-fetched. Lost in thought, John almost didn't notice the commotion happening across the street. A burly man, clearly drunk, was yelling and cursing as he wielded a stick. John squinted, trying to make out the target of the man's rage. Then he saw it, a tiny, defenseless puppy, cowering against the wall. Without hesitation, John sprinted towards the scene, his blood boiling. "Hey!" he shouted. "Leave that dog alone!" The drunk man turned, sneering at John with glazed eyes. "Mind your own business, pretty boy," he slurred, raising the stick again. John lunged forward and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until he dropped the weapon with a yelp. Get out of here before I call the cops, John growled. The man staggered away, muttering obscenities under his breath. Heart pounding, John knelt down and scooped up the trembling puppy. It's okay, little guy, he murmured. I've got you now. Let's get you checked out, huh? As he cradled the tiny dog against his chest, Madame Natalie's words flashed through his mind once more. Could she have been right after all? Rise and shine, Johnny boy, Robert's voice boomed, startling John awake. Time to hit the lake for some fishing, just like old times. John groaned and rolled over, burying his face in the pillow. After rescuing the puppy, now affectionately named Graff after his grandfather, and taking him to the emergency vet, it had been well past midnight by the time he'd gotten to bed. Come on, Pop. The fish will still be there in a couple more hours, he grumbled. Nonsense, Robert insisted. The early bird gets the trout. Now move your keister before I drag you out by your ear. Knowing resistance was futile, John hauled himself up and began getting dressed. 20 minutes later, father and son were bumping along the dirt road in Robert's ancient pickup truck, fishing poles rattling in the back. I've been thinking, Robert mused as he pulled up to their favorite spot on the lake's edge. How about we make things a bit more interesting with a little wager? John raised an eyebrow. Oh, what did you have in mind? If you catch more fish than your old man, I'll finally let you buy me that newfangled car you've been yapping about, Robert proposed. But if I win, you have to promise to spend New Year's here with your ma and me. No last-minute business trips. You're on, John agreed, already plotting. He loved his dad fiercely, but the man's stubborn pride meant he'd never accept a new vehicle outright, unless he lost a bet fair and square. As they cast their lines and settled in to wait, John discreetly released a few fish when Robert's back was turned. Spending the holidays with his family and getting his dad into a safer, more reliable car, there was no downside. That evening, while Robert and Linda watched a movie, John snuck out to pay Madame Natalie another visit. He found her packing up her fortune-telling booth, humming an exotic melody. I had a feeling you'd be back, she said with a knowing smile. The fates work in mysterious ways, do they not? About that, John began, cutting to the chase. Your prediction came true. And now I have a business proposition for you. Natalie cocked her head, intrigued. I'm listening. John took a deep breath. The saboteur I mentioned, the one trying to ruin my business, I need your help to smoke them out. Come to New York, pose as my fiancé at my next big meeting. While you're there, see what you can sniff out with your, mystical insights. And in return? Natalie prompted. I'll pay you handsomely, John promised. 10 grand plus all expenses paid. What do you say? Madame Natalie considered for a long moment, then broke into a sly grin. I say you've got yourself a deal, Mr. Hanson. When do we begin? The opulent conference room at Hanson Enterprises was a buzz of activity, every seat filled with John's top executives and key investors. The air hummed with a mixture of anticipation and tension as the fate of the company hung in the balance. Natalie, a vision of sophistication in her form-fitting Gucci dress and towering Manolo Blahnik heels, worked the room like a seasoned pro. She laughed at all the right jokes, touched arms with just the right amount of flirtation, and exuded an aura of charm that had the men eating out of the palm of her hand. But beneath her dazzling smile and sparkling eyes, Natalie's mind was razor-sharp, attuned to every nuance and undercurrent in the room. As the meeting droned on, the conversation inevitably turned to the elephant in the room, the string of high-profile deals that had inexplicably fallen through at the 11th hour, costing the company millions. John's right-hand man and CFO, Steve Markham, shook his head with a heavy sigh. His usually immaculate suit looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in it, and dark circles underscored his bloodshot eyes. It's a damn shame, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. That tech startup acquisition was a game-changer. We were so close to closing the deal, and then, poof, just like all the others. Natalie saw her moment and struck with the precision of a viper. Funny you should mention that, Steve, she purred, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. Because according to my sources, you're the one who's been sabotaging these deals. And not just for kicks, but to line the pockets of that gold-digging girlfriend of yours. A stunned silence blanketed the room, so thick you could hear a pin drop. Every eye swiveled to Steve, whose face had gone ashen. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Natalie, you're way out of line here. But it was too late. Candace, Steve's girlfriend, shot up from her chair like a bottle rocket, her pretty features twisted with rage. You idiot! She screeched, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. I told you to keep your damn mouth shut. Now look what you've done. In a whirlwind of clicking Louboutins and a cloud of cloying perfume, Candace snatched up her Birkin bag and stormed out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Steve seemed to deflate before their very eyes, slumping back in his chair like a puppet with its strings cut. He couldn't even bring himself to meet John's piercing gaze. Tom Jennings, John's other trusted confidant, gaped at the scene in utter disbelief. His craggy face was etched with lines of shock and betrayal. Steve, man, how could you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. After everything we've been through, all the years of friendship, how could you do this to John, to the company? John held up a hand, his expression grim but controlled. Though his eyes blazed with fury, his voice remained steady. We'll deal with the fallout later, he said, his tone brooking no argument. For now, we need to focus on damage control and moving forward. This meeting is adjourned. As the shell-shocked executives filed out of the room, murmuring amongst themselves, Natalie turned to John with a self-satisfied smirk. Well, looks like my work here is done, she drawled, examining her perfectly manicured nails. I trust you'll honor our agreement? John gave a curt nod, his jaw clenched tight. A deal's a deal, he ground out. The money will be in your account by morning. He paused, and for a moment, his stern facade cracked, revealing a glimmer of vulnerability. And Natalie, thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. Natalie's smile softened, becoming something almost genuine. Don't mention it, handsome, she murmured, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. That's what partners are for. 1 year later. John, if you don't stop pacing, you're going to wear a hole in the floor, Natalie chided gently, rubbing her swollen belly. John paused his restless movements and ran a hand through his hair. I can't help it, Nat. What if something goes wrong? What if… Darling, relax, Natalie soothed. Women have been giving birth since the dawn of time. Our little one and I will be just fine. Just then, a familiar face poked into the private hospital suite. Knock, knock, Steve called tentatively. I hope I'm not interrupting. Steve! John crossed the room and pulled his old friend into a hug. I'm so glad you could make it. And perfect timing. I'm in no state to drive us to the hospital myself. Steve chuckled. Happy to be of service. And might I add, fatherhood suits you, John. I've never seen you so… frazzled. John made a face at him as he grabbed Natalie's hospital bag. Yeah, yuck it up. We'll see who's laughing when it's your turn, wise guy. As the trio made their way out to the car, Graf the dog trotting happily at their heels, John marveled at the twists and turns his life had taken in just 1 short year. He'd gained a wife, a child, a pet, and had even managed to sniff out a traitor in his midst, with a little help from a very special fortune-teller. Steve, to his credit, had been repentant and willing to pay his dues. Slowly but surely, he'd earned back John's trust, and their friendship was now stronger than ever. Funny how life had a way of coming full circle. As for Natalie, John knew he'd never have met her if not for that chance encounter on the street corner. And now, she was his everything, his partner, his soulmate, the mother of his child. Fate worked in mysterious ways, indeed. All right, let's get this show on the road, John declared, helping Natalie into the passenger seat. Next stop, Parenthood. As Steve pulled out of the driveway, John reached over and squeezed Natalie's hand. I love you, he murmured. Both of you. Natalie smiled back at him, her eyes shining with emotion. We love you too, John. More than anything. And with that, they sped off towards their next great adventure, as a family. Come what may, they would face it all together, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death did them part. Because that's what true love was all about. Loyalty, devotion, and the courage to stand by each other's side no matter what life threw their way. John and Natalie had found that in each other, and they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they would continue to choose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. As the hospital loomed into view, John felt a sense of peace wash over him. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he had everything he needed right here in this car: his wife, his child, his best friend, and his faithful furry companion. With their love and support, he could take on the world, and he would, for them and for the beautiful future they were building together.